I'm going to show you two different methods of sewing the rulo loop. Firstly, using a rulo loop turner, which I highly recommend you get. I don't have that many specialized sewing notions, but this is one that I really like. On one end, it is, it's honestly like a latch hook, and it's just got a long, very thin metal shank, I suppose, and then a handle. The other method is using a piece of cord. This cord is actually too thick, but I don't have any thinner stuff. So you'd probably want it about half the width of this. A piece of string, like some kitchen string, would be fine. I've cut two bias pieces and I'm going to fold them right sides together. So for the one that I'm going to do with the rulo turner, I'm just going to fold in half, right sides together. I'm not going to press it, and I'm going to stitch about 3 millimeters from that edge there. That's pretty close to the edge. So that's 1/8 of an inch. For the procedure with the cord, what you're going to do is lay the cord inside here, fold it in half, kind of like you're making a piping, but with the right sides together. And then you're going to take a zipper foot and sew right up close to there. I'm going to do the best I can with this thicker cord, so I'm going to end up with a probably bigger rulo loop than I would prefer. With the zipper foot, I'm going to go snug right up against there, sew all the way along, and also anchor it at one end. So I'm going to do that and be back. Okay, so I've sewn that. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to trim this back. I don't want to trim it super duper close to the stitching. Firstly, because I don't want it to unravel on me, and secondly, because the loop looks pretty nice when it's kind of full of seam allowance. So I'm going to trim it back so to about 3 millimeters or 1/8 of an inch. I don't know why my camera is not focusing. Let's try that. Okay, so that's trimmed back. I'm going to trim back the other one too. Ooh, now it doesn't know where to focus. I'm going to try again. There we go. This one's going to be thicker because remember that cord I was using is a bit thicker than I would recommend, but I can at least show you like the process. Okay. So let's start with the one with the cord in it. So I'm just going to expose this edge of the cord. I'm going to hold this as the free end, and this is the end, whoops, that I anchored with just a few stitches. So I'm just going to start by pulling it inside out from the anchored end. Don't start pulling from this end or you'll get into a world of trouble. So start pulling it, and you're going to pull it inside out. So it's going to start turning. Don't know if you can see that. It's turning through itself. Ta-da! So honestly, pretty thick rulo loop. I mean, this would work, but it's just not very dainty, and we're going for a slightly dainty look here, but that's okay. Here we go. So you're going to thread the loop turner up through there, and then the little hook on the end you hook around. I don't actually bother with the latch bit, but you just kind of stick it through, and the most challenging part is actually making sure that it doesn't catch on the way back, which it wants to do. So the hook always wants to hook onto bits you don't want it to hook onto. Maybe that's what that latch is for, but I can never get it to shut. So once you get it started, it's pretty easy. It's just a question of getting it started. Okay, try that again. go over. There we go. I actually flipped the latch up this time, that did work. And then just easing it back. Always pull from this like folded end, otherwise you'll get a big bunchy mess. Okay, there we go. Whew. That worked. So there's our rulo. So this is our rulo that I did, it's probably 4 millimeters or 5 millimeters. It's not 1/4 of an inch. It's smaller than 1/4 of an inch. And then this is the kind of the thicker one. You can see that when we put this, like if we put this around a button loop, it's gonna look really, really nice. Okay, moving on. Let's move on to the collar. So, I have my collar piece here, and I have fused it, and I have my other collar piece here, and I have fused that too. So when you interface this, just make sure that you center that into the middle of one of the collar pieces. Okay, so I have my button here. I'm just going to flip, this is the interfaced piece, I'm going to flip it over. So the interfaced piece is the piece that you're going to see, and we have that one as the interfaced one because it's so smooth. I'm going to take my button and I'm going to take my loop. So I'm just going to trim back see this bit at the end, it's kind of not really sewn, so I'm just going to cut that off. And then I'm going to measure my loop around, oops, I dropped it, around the circumference of that button, leaving a good tail. So I don't know if you can see that, it's really hard to show you. I've got the loop like wrapped around the button, and it needs to be that size so the button can get through. So I'm just gonna kind of pinch it there in place and just, you know, that's actually a bit loose. So I'm gonna snug it up just a little bit. I don't think I'm doing anything here. Here we go, there we go. So I'm gonna snug it up so I know what's gonna feel good with the button passing through it. And then I'm gonna mark that, and I mark it with a pin. Okay, so that's where I want it stitched down. And I'm gonna trim this off. Okay, so I have my interfaced piece of the collar here, and I'm going to pop my loop on what's going to be the right hand side when it's on the body of the collar. So with the right side's up, that's the right side here, and I'm just going to pop it down on there so that the pin sits, or the marking sits 1 centimeter in from the edge here, or 3/8 of an inch, just like that. I'm going to leave that pin in there, and I'm going to get another pin and just pin it in place. Did that even, yeah, there we go, pin it in place. Just pin it a bit nicer. Right. So I am going to stay stitch this down just 1/4 of an inch or 6 millimeters from the edge of the collar there. Then what I'm going to do is take my non-interfaced collar, flip it to the wrong side, and I'm going to press this bottom curved edge up 1 centimeter or 3/8 of an inch. So just 1 centimeter or 3/8 of an inch, press it up all the way. If you have trouble doing that, you can sew a row of stitching at that fold line, so 1 centimeter or 3/8 of an inch in from there, which will help you fold it over. So I might do that. Okay, so I'm going to press and I'm going to stay stitch and I'll be back. Okay, I run that row of stitching just 1 centimeter from the edge, 3/8 of an inch from the edge here, and I've pressed it up. This is the non-interface side. And then I also stay stitched that loop in place. And now what I'm going to do is place the collar pieces right sides together. So keeping that edge folded up when I do that. Just going to pin it so you can see. So what you can do is you can pop a pin in. This is the side with the loop in it. Pop a pin in and then turn it back just to make sure that your loop, whoops, that your loop looks good. And I think mine looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. So you are going to sew up here, along here. There's actually a little pivot point here because there's a corner all the way along here, pivot, along here, pivot, and down, finishing here, making sure that that edge is flipped up the whole time. So sew that using a 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimeter seam allowance. Right, so I've sewn that, and I've actually started doing the clipping because my video camera cut out, the battery went flat. So what I've done is I have clipped into these curves just with a single snip. So where the curves are the, I don't know, tightest, I suppose, you need to clip more closely together. Make sure you don't clip through your stitching line. Now, we're going to fold, we're going to turn through the collar right now. There are several ways of turning through corners. So one way is you can trim off this and clip it into like a very pointy shape and then turn it through and then use something pointy to turn it. What I often do is I actually fold it down. So I'm just going to fold it sorry, I'm trying to describe this well. I'm going to fold it at 45-degree angle. And then I'm going to fold it along the stitching lines like that. And what that does is it creates a nice corner, but also kind of pushes, the fabric pushes it out. Now you can just get your finger and thumb in there like this and hold it and then turn it through, kind of holding that flat. You can get something pointy to poke it out gently, but you want to keep it nice and folded in there. So that it gives a really nice corner like that. And the same here for this part that's got an angle. Just fold it down and up with your thumb. So I'm just kind of taking this, kind of pleating it and pushing it up. Okay. So you can see how nice that corner is. Let's do it on the other side. It's a bit trickier because there's the loop in the way, but I'm going to fold it down at a 45-degree angle and then fold along the seam lines. My thumb inside, finger, holding it and flip it through. I've got that loop there. Then for this one, give it a little pleat. There we go. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it to my ironing board and I'm going to press this up like this, flat, and then press it underneath. So I'm going to press as much of this seam flat as I can and then press it under to make the collar. So I'm going to do that and be back. And there's a pretty nice collar. So this is going to be the outside, and then if I flip it over, see, this is going to be the inside of the collar, and it's still folded up like that. So let's prepare the shirt. So we have our front here. So we're going to run some gathering threads just as before between the shoulder seam right around to there's a notch here that says stop gathers. So between the stop gathers notch and the shoulder seam. So I'm going to run my 2 rows of gathering threads just as before at 1/4 inch and 3/4 of an inch. Okay, I'm going to let you in on a little secret here. I actually back tacked at the shoulder edge. Shh, don't tell anyone. I did that just so that I have something to pull against. It's not foolproof, but I really don't want to pull my gathering threads out. Okay. I have my collar here, and remember that the right side of my collar is the interface side, and that's the bit that doesn't have the folded up edge. Okay, so I'm going to kind of open up my collar a little bit, and I'm going to pin it onto the front with the right sides together, lining up the front edge of the collar with the front edge, that folded edge that we made earlier. At the front, you'll have to kind of open it up like this to pin it, because we're gonna, so just the interface side, we're gonna hold the other side out of the way. Now, the notch that you'll find, where's my notch? There it is, here. Matches the shoulder notch, the shoulder seam here. So I'm just going to match that up and pin it. We're going to be pinning to both layers of that yoke. I'm going to pin the other shoulder notch to this shoulder seam here. And I'm going to pin this other front edge to that matching edge here, remembering to open that back. Oops, I didn't pin it to anything. There we go. Okay. Now let's pin the back edge of the collar to both yokes. Now it's matching opposite curves, so you'll have to pin fairly regularly. Make sure you're pinning through all 3 layers. So I like to kind of go from each end, making sure there aren't any puckers. Just kind of patting it like this to make sure there aren't puckers. Okay. Just easing that. Okay. So the back part of the collar is together. Now we need to pull up our gathering threads. We've got all of this together. So I'm just gonna make sure, even though I did back tack at the shoulder seam, I'm just gonna do my winding around trick anyway, just for safety's sake. And I'm going to pin at that stop gathers point. That's a needle as well. Okay. What's going on with my gathering threads? Oops. It's stuck. Stuck. Oh, I just pinned through it. That's why. Okay. There we go. That's better. Okay. Pulling them up. So remember, you just kind of pull kind of roughly until it approximately matches. And I'm gonna just wind it around that pin just to stop it from ungathering on me. And then I'm gonna make these gathers really pretty. Remember, these are at the front, so we really want them to be as good as we can get. So that means, to me, that means they are even. So see how there's like a big lump of gathers here? I don't want that. I want to spread the gathers out evenly. No big tucks or puckers. Okay. Then I'm going to pin it, matching those opposite curves, just like on the back neck. Making sure nothing's tucked under. Okay, I have a boatload of pins here, but this is a place where it is warranted just to keep everything really, really nice. Remember, I've got that non-interface side of the collar folded back. Just gonna check. Things look pretty good. Okay, let's have a look on the other side. So I'm going to find that shoulder seam, just anchor those threads. Oops, lots of threads. And then pin up to the stop gathers notch. Pull up my gathering threads till it's about there. As you can see, it's all in a big blob. That's not a problem at this point. I'm gonna anchor them on my pin and then play with the gathers. You know, when I said before that gathering isn't my favorite thing to do, maybe I need to qualify that and say gathering huge skirts is not my favorite thing to do. But I don't actually mind gathering when you want to make it, you know, look good. Just these smaller amounts, it's fine. Okay. Right. So that interface side of the collar is all pinned. I'm going to sew along there, holding that non-interface side of the collar out of the way. So that's particularly pertinent at this, the center fronts. I need to hold that out of the way while I sew with a 1 centimeter or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way along there. So I'm going to sew that and be back. Okay, so I have sewn that. What I like to do now is, before I clip anything, is I like to flip it up and just go over it and check. I want to check that there's a nice straight line at my center front. I want to check that the gathers don't have any weird puckers or anything, or bits where I've caught other bits. I check along the center back to make sure there's no tucks. Okay, everything looks pretty good so far. Those gathers look okay. Okay, so at this point I feel pretty good about that. And so I'm gonna pull out my extra row of gathering thread. Pulling the wrong side, I should be pulling from here. Okay. That allows me to just double check. Just clipping off this thread. Okay, on the other side. Okay, looks good. Okay, pulled out the gathering thread. Great. Okay. Now, here's where you want to be pretty careful. It's quite easy to clip through too many layers here. So I'm holding it flat again with the collar opened out. I'm flipping it so I can see, like, this is the back yokes. Just making sure that's only seam allowance I've got there. And I'm going to grade and clip this. So this is from the inside of the garment. You can see all this shoulder seam. It's pretty bulky, so I'm going to clip some of that bulk away. And very, very carefully I'm going to grade this seam. I know people are like, how on earth, why do you grade with these stupid thread snips? You know, the answer is because I haven't found anything better for like little areas like this. I'm going really slowly and just honestly making sure I'm just getting that one layer of fabric. And I mean, maybe that's why I use the thread snips, I don't know. Because I feel like I have a lot of control. And you can kind of feel, like I just felt like I went through 2 layers of fabric, and yeah, I did. Like it felt like I was going through more than 1 layer. Now here, this shoulder seam again, I'm just making sure I've only got that. I'm clipping into it and just clipping out some of that bulk. Okay. This is a very fine lawn, so I don't need to do too much. Now I'm gonna, again, hold it really carefully, and I'm gonna clip into this back neck curve. Just like we did when we turned that collar. Let's see how it feels, if it needs more grading when I flip it up. some of this bulk here. Okay, this is where I want you to like hold your breath and be careful. I'm just gonna, just flipped it over, I'm just gonna grade actually just the collar, sorry, clip just the collar piece, the interface collar piece only, because the gathers will kind of sort themselves out. And what's going to happen is this part is going to go up inside the collar like that. So I'm going to clip away some of this extra collar bit, but not the part that's kind of holding it all up there. I don't think. We'll see. The other side. Again, I'm just going to clip just the interface collar. I'm leaving the gathers alone. Go in there. Okay. Okay. Now I'm going to just take this seam allowance that I created and I'm going to, oops, just clip these off. So I'm going to take this seam allowance and put it inside the collar there. Okay, so just tucking it up in there. Now I can kind of feel, this is the side with that button placket. It's a bit bulky, so I'm just going to take it back and I'm going to cut away some of that bulk. Make sure you're grading and not just cutting it down. Okay, let's see now. Yeah, that's better. Making sure I can get that tucked up in there really nicely. Threads everywhere. Okay. Right. Let me just grab some pins. Okay, we're going to go from the outside now. And I'm just going to be tucking that seam allowance up into the collar like this. So flipping that uninterfaced side down. And I'm going to give it, actually before I do that, I'm going to give it a little press. So I'm going to press this side of the collar up so we get a nice crisp line. Okay, remember what I said about the gathers, using the point of the iron there? So do that all the way around, pressing the seam allowance up into the collar. So I pressed it a combination of from the outside and from the inside. And I'm just going to pin that collar into place. So I'm making sure that on the back side, my uninterfaced side of the collar is folded under, you know, where we folded it in the first place. And I'm just putting a pin. And I'm putting it just above that seam line. So we're not going to stitch in the ditch for this because of the gathers. We're going to stitch just on the collar side. So I'm just going to pin it, making sure that all of that seam allowance is tucked up there, and always checking the bulk, bits we don't like. Don't want to make the collar too lumpy, or lumpy at all really. So here I'm just making sure that the gathers are all up in there nicely. Okay, it's a bit easier around the back. So you'll notice I'm pinning parallel to that seam line. For this stage, it's a little bit easier to do that, I think. It just holds it down better. If you don't want to see the stitching, like if you want to keep that collar really clean, then you can actually hand stitch this down from the inside, so that it would be a really nice finish as well. Just tucking, whoops, tucking that up into the collar, making sure it's all up there. You can see here there's this bit of gathering that needs to be tucked up, so I'm going to just tuck that into place and then pin. Okay, before I sew it, I'm just going to check from the inside, make sure everything looks good. It does. Again, if you want a label, the kind that kind of hangs down from a seam, now would be the time to put it in there, but I'm not going to. So now you can either, we're going to pin stitch just on the collar side, so just a pin's width away from, like on the collar side, away from the shirt, all the way around that neckline to secure that collar down. If you wish, you can also go around the upper edge, which I'm going to do. I think it gives a really nice crisp finish. I think, actually, you know what? I'm probably gonna, maybe I'll have a look when I'm done and have a look how that is. But I think I'm gonna do it. Yeah, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna actually start not from the very center, because I'll have to back tack, and I don't want to back tack right at the center front. So I'll probably start near the back somewhere, or if I'm going to start at the center front, maybe I will start at the center front actually, thinking out loud. I'll just start on the left hand side where you won't be able to see it. So I'm going to do that, go around, pin stitch / edge stitch all the way down, making sure I'm catching that underneath edge, but it shouldn't be a problem.